The only thing that keeps them unified is their common interest, which I think the financial industrial complex, the Gulf sovereign wealth funds, and Chinese money have made it where all of their investments perform well because of this collective flow of funds, rather than now each individual country gets to have their own narrative, their own religion, their own leadership. And I believe even right now, Iran is on board with this vision. They've got their own internal issues due to economic warfare. But I believe that any war, and the 12-day war, was to take out the IRGC members as an inside job that needed in order to move towards this new collective vision. And all the proxies are being dumped right now, where they either unify, get eliminated, and essentially Israel is being, if you look at what America and Israel has now become, they have become the military for this unification of financial interest. They can go and take Venezuelan oil, but the profits flow through Chinese infrastructure, Gulf sovereign wealth, and Western financial banking interests.
That's a wild thing to say, that America takes the oil from Venezuela, but it doesn't benefit America. It benefits China, the Gulf, and the Western banks. That's kind of crazy.
Okay, all right, so I understand. And so let me use a historical analogy to see if I truly understand what you're saying, okay? So 1688 is the Glorious Revolution, and that creates the Bank of England, the City of London, transnational capital, which runs the world today. So why was the Bank of England created? Well, because you have all these warring parties in Europe, the Habsburgs, the Catholic Church, the Dutch Republic, and their leaderships needed to keep their wealth safe, right? Especially the Dutch East Indies Company, the VOC. So the Dutch and the English came to an agreement where this wealth would be transferred to England for safekeeping. And this created the Bank of England, 1694. And this ultimately led to the creation of the British Empire. So so is that what GCC will be, where transnational capital, because of all these wars going on, because of all this instability in America, in Russia, and China, transnational capital is looking for a new host that would be safe, and that would be far away from all these wars, and they would establish a new entity in the GCC. Is that a fair analogy?
Yeah, so even if you look at the British Empire, what was the British Empire, as you said? It was the private interest, which was the British East India Company. It was the government, which is you enslave it through debt until it's bankrupt, and the Bank of England, which was the privatization of the resources and mercantilism, where you steal all the world's real money through printed money. And so you take the gold from India, you take China's silver through opium wars. But in the end, they end up with the hard assets, and the corporate interest ends up with all of the stock assets, and the government just becomes the piggy bank. They repeated that exercise with the US. The government is the piggy bank. Yep. BlackRock and Transnational Capital and State Street and Vanguard are the British East India Company, ending up with all the assets.
That's a great analogy. I think you might be right.
And the Federal Reserve is owned by the banks, and now the banks are owned by the money managers as well. So you've got this stateless transnational capital, which I think it's always been. We've just had the illusion of nationalism previously, which was just a utility of building an army under the geyser of religion or religion or army. So now you've got this new
Wow, that's jarring to hear it, isn't it?
National financial capital, that they essentially call the shots, and they're deciding which zones are going to be the war zones. Middle East, they have regional stability. China is going to have its growth story and manufacturing base. And America is going to be civil unrest, and Europe is going to be sacrificed as a war zone. And so military are moving from the Middle East.
China gets the growth. America will be in chaos. Europe will be sacrificed as a war zone. That's terrible. And I think it's already happening.
Over to Europe, and financial capital has got a new partner, which is China, the Gulf countries, and America just has its capital markets and you use its military industrial complex, technical industrial complex, and financial industrial complex. But it's transnational, it's superseding borders.
Okay, I understand. Okay, so it seems to me our disagreement is this. You think that they will relocate to the GCC, whereas I think transnational capital will center itself in Jerusalem. So let me...
As always, Professor Jiang wouldn't touch China. He wouldn't expound on China, which is fine. I mean, we already knew that. And can I just say, both Simon Dixon and Professor Jiang are incredibly smart. And yet they don't compete with each other on this podcast. I love that they're attentively listening to each other. And I can see Professor Jiang really digesting what Simon's saying. And it's really wholesome to see that.
Explain to you why I think Jerusalem makes more sense for transnational capital than the GCC. First of all, Israel, the state of Israel, has a wide network of Jewish diaspora, right? So the Jewish diaspora everywhere. And you look at the presidents of Mexico, of a lot of places, they're Jewish. So if Israel were to become Judaica, you could leverage this wide Jewish diaspora to your benefit. That's number one. Number two is Mossad. Mossad is the most effective intelligence agency in the world. So in today's world, if there's anyone who opposes you, you don't have to go and start a war. You can use targeted assassinations. You can use blackmail. You can use surveillance, and that's what Mossad is very, very good at. That's point number two. Point number three is Israel is the only country in the Middle East which has nuclear weapons. The GCC does not have nuclear weapons. That's a huge advantage for Israel, and that's what keeps Israel safe. Israel has a central option where if it ever feels threatened, then it nukes the world, not its enemies, but the entire world. So
that's a wild thing to say.
Huge advantage for Israel, and I don't think the GCC could ever compensate for that. Number four is that Israel has tremendous human capital. Israel is one of the most well-educated societies in the world. Where would you find the human capital in the GCC? Saudi Arabia, Dubai, Qatar imports most of its human capital. So if I'm transnational capital, why would I go to the GCC and establish all this knowledge infrastructure that I would need to run my enterprise when I could just go to Israel, which has all this human capital? Some of the best universities in the world are based in Israel. And then the other element that I think is very important is the eschatological element, where you have a lot of the secret societies, the Freemasons, the Jesuits, the 17 Frankists, who believe that Jerusalem will be where the new world government will be based. So I solve a lot of problems if I base all my transnational capital in Jerusalem. So why would I? So I don't understand what the advantage of the GCC would be over Jerusalem.
He didn't need to go to the Freemasons. He had strong arguments. He had 4 strong arguments in diaspora, intelligence, nuclear weapon, and human capital. That's enough. That's convincing.
Yeah, so if you look at what's happening right now is BlackRock via Saudi Aramco has a board seat on, one of the executives is now a board member of BlackRock. BlackRock is setting up their office in Saudi Arabia. You've got many of the banks that are relocating. China just did, Saudi Arabia just did their bond offering with China. It was denominated in dollars, but it was done via Saudi investment banks. And China also did a bond offering. So all of these alternative payment rails and alternative financial rails are being built. So what's actually effectively happening is you've got Western financial interest that is unifying with this Gulf capital. Now, in terms of the nuclear power, so here's what I think. So there's a tiny Israeli sovereign wealth fund. Now its assets are being utilized by this financial industrial complex. but none of the value of what Israel's building is being maintained to keep Israel sovereign. And so it is just like America, just because.
So Simon's trying to qualify with imperfect data that only 1 to 2% of the global wealth is shared by the Jewish people. And if that's true, I think what Simon's trying to say is the idea and the theory, the narrative that the Jews control the world is actually not true, while it's actually benefiting someone else who actually controls it.
But I do believe all Israel had will be integrated into this GCC and this Abraham Accords union that is being built. And that is, and so all of those tools, which we even saw, for example, Israel had that $35 billion energy agreement with Egypt. Now that creates a dependency upon Egyptian revenue when America's no longer going to be funding some of that revenue. It will be integrated into these rails. And so I don't see it becoming. Now, the nuclear question is a very good question. My personal belief, and I can't prove this, and it's just a theory, is that obviously the way that nukes were, the nukes were achieved by Israel with the assassination of JFK and the taking over of New Mech and the creation of the deep state when Mossad and CIA became more integrated. But my personal belief is that Israel is a rep of the US military-industrial complex. The US military-industrial complex controls the deep state, but they are also subordinate to this financial industrial complex. And so my guess is that Israeli nukes would still have key dependencies upon the same type of infrastructure that runs the US nuclear program as well. Can't prove that, it's just a theory. But I don't think Israel is as sovereign and as powerful as we are led to believe.
Okay, so let's focus on Saudi Arabia. I'm trying to answer capital. I have $200 that I want to invest, okay? But Saudi Arabia has something called a line, and I'm not sure what the budget was, $1 trillion or something like that, okay? Which was this like linear city in the desert. So if I'm trying to answer capital, you know, I'm a pretty smart guy. I'm gonna ask some questions. My first question is, why would they come up? Why would they have these ideas? Like what is the rationale for the line? That's number one. Number two is, how does this thing get approved? Is there no process in which architects and experts can tell the leadership of Saudi Arabia, the line is absolutely insane, don't do it? Are there no checks and balances in Saudi Arabia? That's number two. Number three is, if you're an investor in the line and they cancel the project, how can you get your money back? I mean, I'm not an investor, but I'm just saying, like, you know, if I have $200, I would want to know these questions. How do these projects get approved in Saudi Arabia? How are these projects conceived? And what happens if these projects go sideways, as what has happened with the line?
Sorry, did you say line? I didn't hear that.
The line, yeah. I think it's called NEOM, the line.
Okay, I'm not too familiar with that particular piece, and I'm not too familiar with. But my guess is that you know, the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund has had Western consultation. You know, they do this via an investment committee, but obviously it's a centralized power structure, which is why they're able to make strategic investments that make sense for their unification around these hostile powers. And then they've unified with other Gulf sovereign wealth as well. But yeah, I don't necessarily have the answers of how investment decisions are made, but they have had lots of Western consultation. So but it's a centralized power structure.
Please look at this, okay? The line, okay?
Yeah.
It's a straight line.
I have it here on screen, Simon.
Yeah, running across Saudi Arabia. Who came up with this idea? It's utterly insane.
I've never heard of the Line Project, have you? This is why Professor's good, because I'm going to have to agree with him here, because I'm not sure if I will put my money into Saudi, even though Simon Dixon made a good argument about the Gulf Sovereign Fund. To be honest, I'm not sure if I trust them to manage my money.
Oh, right. This is the large building, yeah? Yeah.
It's literally a line.
It is literally a line.
It's literally a line. It's supposed to be like a city within a line in the middle of nowhere in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. I have no idea is the answer to that. But what's the wider point here? That you think they made bad investment
They've already spent billions of dollars on this thing, okay? And it's going nowhere.
Yeah. Well, one answer to that is, I guess you could say, what is their projection of power? Their projection of power is the ability to show how much financial firing power they have. So you have a massive PR blitz around these crazy and failed projects. And maybe they were never meant to happen. Maybe they were meant to be abandoned. I've got no idea. Maybe they've made bad decisions in the past. I'm not really here to shill for Saudi Arabia's investment decisions.
Let's look at another example where they spend about $1 billion on bringing Ronaldo to Saudi Arabia, right?
Yeah.
And the stadiums are empty.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, if I'm trying to generate capital, and I have billions of dollars, why would I invest in GCC when they do this sort of stuff?
Well, they're not investing in GCC. Basically, what's happened is you've got the ability to raise capital, which is Western financial markets and capital markets. And every single deal that geopolitically and strategically is happening right now, including the acquisition of all the key artificial intelligence technology, all of the fundraisers, every single major investment that's happening, all the IPOs that are happening this year, whether it's XIA, whether it's SpaceX, all of them have Gulf sovereign wealth funds in every single transaction. So clearly, BlackRock and the financial industrial complex.
I get it now. So Simon's saying, well, he's not saying the Gulf will manage my money. He's saying that the Gulf is the new pipeline of the global powers money. So that makes sense.
Have decided that collectively they're going to be aligning financial interests with the Gulf sovereign wealth funds. And that has provided a conduit between Chinese money, which is the partnerships that Saudi's doing with China. And they're sat in the middle as they build out all these alternative payment rails and various other things. So I think real power, and I'm not saying the Gulf is the power, I'm saying real power, China, which to some degree Russia has become dependent upon, and US, which is Western financial power, they've decided that the Gulf sovereign wealth funds and the Middle Eastern corridors and the energy that's needed for all of these artificial intelligence projects, that the Middle East is going to be included in that. And they get to set the price of oil to a greater degree, while China has built massive reserves. But they've been utilizing all of these different conflicts in order to acquire it cheaper. And then America has now become an energy exporter, but they can't compete with the Middle East in terms of the cost base.
This is true, I think. It's not enough to have the oil reserves. It's critical to be able to process the oil cheaply. And maybe that's why the Middle East is always in trouble, because they can produce such cheap oil.
By replacing jobs with AI and robotics, charging more tax through tariffs, which takes money out of the money supply, and also getting down the price of oil, which bankrupts many of the Western oil producers that can't produce at those cost base. So inflation is being, clearly controlled. But again, it's sovereign China, sovereign wealth in the Middle East, and then Western financial industrial complex. That's every transaction you'll see right now is being invested through that rail.
Right. So my question then is, fine, if the GCC writes all the checks, that's great. But that doesn't really conflict with Pax Judaica, where the capital is Jerusalem. All decisions are made out of Jerusalem.
Yes, so this is what I was thinking as well. Do you think that they're saying the same thing, but with two different frameworks? Please share your thoughts. What do you think?
Good returns. I mean, is there a conflict here where Jerusalem is the capital, where Pax Judaica is really the control center, but the GCC are just the primary investors in this enterprise?
Yeah, because the way I view it, and my opinion is worth a dime a dozen, but the way I view it is that anytime you have like these airstrike spats between Iran and Israel, it's always the GCC countries coming in to intercept Iran's missiles, but never Israel's missiles. It seems like there is like some sort of coalition around Israel to the point where they're effectively just vassal states for Israel. No, I mean, so if it, and I don't think this conflicts with your thesis either, Simon, because it's effectively saying that, like Professor Jiang just said, they would just be like the financial wing of the broader Pax Judaica vision in the Middle East. I mean, they would still have their sovereignty and everything, but they would be largely controlled by Jerusalem.
So that was a sharp question from Danny. I think he's saying, isn't Israel sort of the boss in amongst the Gulf nations? And I'm not sure. I'm honestly not sure.
I think that the Western framing of that they're subordinate to Israel is the correct framing. Israel represents military interests and now financial interests of American power. And so they are subordinate to originally military power from the West, and now financial power from the West, because BlackRock and the Western powers managed $30 trillion of assets. The Gulf countries manage $5 trillion of assets. That started as complete subordination through 50-50 partnerships. Over time, they managed to maintain some of that wealth. And so, through they're not subordinate to Israel, because Israel represents Western imperial power. And so the technology, for example, they only do the illegal, blatant stuff they couldn't do in America via Israel, and then it gets acquired into the Western capital markets. The value doesn't maintain as Israel as a sovereign state. There's many Israeli billionaires that get to benefit from it. There's Gulf sovereign wealth funds that get to benefit from it. And the key dependency is obviously all the strategic choke points as well. But what I'm saying is that Jerusalem being the capital, fine, that can totally work out. But in terms of Israel as a jurisdiction, maintaining all the power as the new power of the world, I don't think it's an accurate representation of the collective sovereignty that is needed across the region. With Israel being a small country with a small population that is incurring higher and higher level of debt, privatizing more and more of its assets, and being gobbled up by Western and...
Look, I've never heard someone trace the money in Israel and the Middle East like how Simon Dixon does, and honestly, I'm really impressed. It all sounds plausible. It doesn't even sound like a conspiracy theory. And Professor Jiang, as always, has been amazing, except that he never went to China. He doesn't want to touch China. But his questions on the Line Project and bringing in history from 1688, they're all very impressive. I learned so much. I thought I understood the world a little bit, but I'm not even sure anymore. If you want to keep watching YouTube videos with me, please subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.